The moment Cher stepped onto the set, something felt off. The lights were as bright as ever, the smiles just as rehearsed, but beneath it all was a strange stillness, a tension that clung to the air like humidity before a storm. She'd done this dance 100 times. Sit down, smile, nod, promote the book, toss a few sound bites into the air, and leave with applause. But today, the stage felt more like a battlefield. Before we dive in, tell us where are you watching from, also subscribe. She slid into the guest chair with practiced ease, a living legend decades deep into a career that had seen her crowned, crushed, and resurrected more times than the tabloids could count. Her eyes scanned the hosts, noting the subtle signs, the too tight grins, the exchanged glances. This wasn't going to be a celebration, it was going to be a challenge. Joy spoke first, leaning forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. So Cher, over 5 decades in the industry, that's impressive. How does someone manage to stay relevant for that long? The word landed like a slap wearing perfume. Relevant. Cher let it hang there, her expression betraying no emotion. But inside, she felt it. The dig. She'd been around long enough to hear every coded insult the media could throw. With a cool breath, she replied, "I think the trick is to never fake it. I've never had to stir up controversy to get attention. My work speaks for itself." A beat, then a slight shift. Whoopi adjusted in her seat. Sarah's smile faltered for half a second. Sunny blinked. Alyssa's jaw visibly clenched. Cher noticed it all. The coordinated discomfort. Something was coming. Ana Navarro, filling in as the 5th host, leaned forward like a predator testing its prey. That's an interesting take, Cher, because some might say your recent tweets have caused, let's say, a bit of a stir. You've been pretty vocal about certain political figures. The room cooled by a few degrees. Cher sat up straighter, a warning flashing behind her eyes. "I've always used my voice to stand for what I believe in," she said, calm but firm. "If people find that controversial, that's their burden, not mine." Joy leaned in next, the veneer of friendliness slipping a little more. "But don't you think entertainers should maybe stick to, well, entertaining? Let the politicians handle the politics." Cher gave a sharp, quiet laugh. "Isn't that rich? Coming from a show that spends half its airtime dissecting politics, I guess it's only acceptable when the opinions match yours." Whoopi jumped in quickly, her tone coated in civility, but laced with condescension. "Now, Cher, let's just have a conversation here." "Are we?" Cher's eyes narrowed. "Because this feels less like a conversation and more like a setup." The atmosphere thickened. The host shifted uneasily, but none backed down. Sarah, perhaps emboldened by group momentum, went for the low blow. "Well, if we're talking transparency, there have been some questions about your personal life lately. Want to clear any of that up?" The studio went still. Even the crew seemed to pause, waiting. Cher blinked once, slowly. Her voice dropped into something lethal. "What exactly are you implying?" Sunny, now fully invested in the ambush, pressed forward. "We're just pointing out that for someone who claims to value honesty and authenticity, there have been inconsistencies. Questions about your relationships, your business deals." Cher stared at her, silent. The kind of silence that makes people rethink everything they just said. But then, slowly, her lips curled into a thin smile, the kind that came with thunder behind it. "You want to talk authenticity?" she said, voice rising. "Let's talk about a show that claims to support women while dragging them through the mud for ratings." Joy bristled. Whoopi tried again to calm the waves, but her words had lost their power. "We're not tearing anyone down, Cher. We're asking fair questions." Cher leaned forward, voice full of fire. "You call this journalism? You spread innuendo and rumors like a gossip rag and call it legitimate. That's what's killing real conversation in this country. Not people like me speaking up, but platforms like yours pretending you're doing good when all you're doing is stirring hate." The control room lit up, cameras zoomed in, producers whispered furiously into headsets. This wasn't just an interview anymore, it was television history. Joy, maybe sensing a loss of control, fired a last shot. "Cher, look, we get that you're passionate, but maybe it's time to accept that your moment has passed." There was no sound for a heartbeat. Then Cher stood. The shift in energy was immediate. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her presence alone silenced the room. "My moment has passed," she echoed softly, then louder. "I've been breaking barriers and facing backlash while you were still learning how to fake empathy for a camera. You think because you have a desk and some cue cards you can define someone's worth." The host fell quiet. Whoopi looked down. Sarah stared at her notes. Alyssa's face had gone pale. Anna, for the first time, leaned back instead of forward. Cher wasn't finished. This is what you wanted, right? An outburst? Something you could clip and spin and feed to the blog so you can ride the outrage wave for another week. Sorry to disappoint. I'm not your victim. She turned to the audience. Not the studio, but the cameras. Her gaze piercing through the lens to wherever millions of viewers sat, watching. I came here to talk about my story, to maybe inspire someone. But instead, I walked into a firing squad dressed up as a morning show. A producer off camera tried to gesture for a break. Too late. The story had taken on a life of its own. Cher turned back to the hosts. I've faced worse than you. Bigger, louder, more dangerous. And every time I walked away standing tall. I'll do the same today, but remember this moment, because it's the day you stopped being journalists and became the story. And with that, she sat down, not because she was defeated, but because she was choosing to. The storm had landed, and the wreckage was only beginning to show. No one said a word. The usually boisterous set of the show was frozen in place, locked in an eerie silence that echoed louder than applause ever could. Cher had just turned their segment into a reckoning. For a moment, it was as if time had paused. The hosts, too stunned to recover, the crew, too afraid to move, the producers whispering frantically behind glass, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the fire burn. Cher adjusted her blazer, eyes steady, hands no longer trembling. She was in complete control now, and everyone in that studio knew it. Sarah, clearly overwhelmed, attempted to reach across the chaos with the most fragile olive branch imaginable. Her voice shook with tension. Cher, I think we're just all a little worked up. Maybe we should all just don't. Cher cut in sharply, her voice calm but lethal. Don't you dare tell me to calm down. You don't get to poke at someone, question their life, and then shrink when they push back. Her gaze fixed on Sarah, whose smile cracked under the pressure. Cher's tone shifted. Not angry now, but measured, piercing. You want to talk about professionalism? I've been performing for live audiences since before you were born. I've had knives thrown at me. Real ones, not just words. And yet I've never used my platform to tear down other women to fill airtime. Anna Navarro, unwilling to sit in silence, leaned in again, this time with a veneer of concern masking the judgment in her voice. Cher, no one's trying to tear you down. We're just asking questions. You're choosing to take them personally. Cher stared at her, incredulous. Personally? Are you actually saying that asking about someone's personal relationships and spreading rumors on live TV isn't personal? That gaslight tactic might work on someone else, but not me. There was no mistaking it now. The mood had curdled. What began as a poorly disguised ambush had collapsed into a public dissection of the very fabric the show claimed to represent. The women behind the desk were no longer the confident commentators the audience knew. They were flailing, exposed. Whoopi attempted once more to intervene, her voice full of that authoritative calm she had mastered over the years. Okay, we need to cool this down. This is live television. Let's show some respect. Cher looked at her. Really looked, not as a fellow performer, but as someone who should have known better. Respect, she repeated with a slow, biting laugh. Where was the respect when you all sat here planning your little ambush? When you decided to question my integrity, my career, my sanity? You call this tough journalism. But let's be honest, it's not journalism. It's a hit job disguised as daytime TV. Joy crossed her arms, her tone no longer hiding its irritation. Well, maybe if you weren't so defensive, people wouldn't think you have something to hide. Cher turned to her sharply, her voice low. Defensive? Her eyes gleamed. You've spent the last 10 minutes pelting me with insinuations, then act surprised when I refuse to sit here and smile through it. And then came the final straw. Sunny Hostin, leaning forward, decided to go where no host should have dared. Cher, given your history and the public outbursts, the volatile relationships, don't you think it's fair for people to wonder if you're projecting your own instability onto others? Time stopped. The studio went completely still, the crew frozen, mouths slightly open. You could hear a pin drop. Even the blinking lights of the camera rig seemed to pause in disbelief. Cher didn't blink. Her voice came back like an earthquake muffled under silk. You really want to do that? She asked. You want to go there? Sunny held her ground, but the false confidence in her posture betrayed the fear in her eyes. She knew, the moment the words left her mouth, that she'd crossed a line she couldn't walk back from. Cher slowly stood, her presence towering now, not just physically, but with a kind of force that made everyone around her look small. I came here to promote my book, to talk about my life, my journey. not to have a panel of so-called journalists dissect my existence like I'm some case study in instability. The camera operators adjusted instinctively, zooming out to capture her full form. This wasn't a meltdown, it was a moment so raw, so real that even the viewers at home could feel it like a static charge through the screen. I have lived more lives than most of you could fathom. I've been blacklisted, stalked, shamed, betrayed, and yet I'm still here, standing, stronger than ever. And you, she turned slowly, eyes scanning each host. You think you can question my stability. You want to talk about being unstable. Try being a woman in this business who refuses to be quiet. Joy sat in stunned silence, the flush in her face deepening. Whoopi leaned back in her chair, lips pressed together. Sarah looked down, unable to meet Cher's eyes. Anna tried to pivot. We're all women here. We're allowed to have conflict, but let's not tear each other down. Cher's laugh was dark. That's exactly what this was. And don't dress it up in empowerment now. Don't pretend you were trying to uplift me. You wanted a spectacle, and congratulations, you got one. She paused, taking in the room, the silence, the fear, the shame. Then, for the first time, her voice softened. You had a chance to do something meaningful today. To celebrate the story of a woman who refused to break, who fought her way through everything this industry threw at her and came out stronger. But instead, you chose cruelty. You chose spectacle. You chose the easy headlines. No one interrupted. She turned, gathering her things calmly. No flurry, no dramatics. Just a quiet finality. And then, as she stepped toward the edge of the set, she turned back. Her voice calm but devastating. I've survived worse than this, but today, you exposed yourselves more than you ever exposed me. I hope your viewers see it for what it was. And with that, she disappeared backstage, the echo of her heels fading into silence. Backstage, Cher's exit was met with a stunned, almost reverent silence. Even the usually unflappable producers stood slack-jawed, their earpieces buzzing with confused chatter from control. The segment had not gone off the rails. The entire train had exploded. And yet Cher's stride remained purposeful, her back straight, her composure intact. She hadn't stormed out, she hadn't flailed, she had commanded her way off that set like a general exiting the battlefield she just conquered. Meanwhile, out front, the wreckage was impossible to deny. Joy Behar sat rigid in her seat, eyes unfocused. Her hands were clasped tightly, knuckles white against the bright fabric of her blazer. She had delivered a line, meant to sting, maybe even go viral, and instead, she'd been obliterated in real time by a guest who refused to be cornered. Whoopi exhaled, slowly as if trying to push the entire moment out of her lungs. Let's go to break, she said, voice low and grave. But no one moved. Not the producers, not the floor manager, not even the teleprompter, which sat frozen mid-sentence. Like even the machine was stunned. There was nothing left to transition into. No cutesy product plug or throwaway joke could come after what had just happened. It would have been like following a lightning strike with a weather report. Sarah Haynes wiped at her eyes, quietly. The tears weren't performative. They weren't for ratings. They were stress. Pure, boiling stress from the moment where the tightrope snapped and the fall was real. Her notes were still in her lap, but she didn't look at them. She couldn't. I didn't mean for it to go like that, she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. No one responded. Anna Navarro sat furthest from the emotional blast zone, but even she wasn't untouched. Her arms were crossed, her face pale. Her usual fire had gone cold. She thought Cher would come in, throw out a few defensive lines, maybe flinch, maybe crack, and then leave with a bruised ego. But what she had witnessed was not a breakdown. It was a reckoning, and she had helped ignite it. Sunny Hostin, still seated closest to where Cher had stood, kept her expression stoic, but her fingers tapped restlessly against the table, betraying nerves. She had crossed the final line. She knew it. She had gone personal, recklessly, publicly, and she'd expected compliance, not confrontation. And now she wasn't sure who she was supposed to be, the prosecutor or the victim. It was Alyssa Farah Griffin who finally broke the silence, her voice brittle with forced rationality. We should probably issue a statement. Damage control. No, Whoopi said firmly, eyes closed. We need to stop and ask ourselves what the hell just happened. Then we talk about damage. The words hung in the air like smoke. They all knew what happened, whether they wanted to admit it or not. They had invited an icon onto their set, a woman forged in fire, molded by decades of survival, loss, and triumph. And instead of honoring that journey, they'd tried to reduce her to a headline. They'd underestimated her, and Cher had made them pay for it. Outside the studio, social media was already a firestorm. Hashtags trended within minutes. Clips, raw, unedited, and damning, spread like gasoline on a matchstick. Viewers weren't just reacting, they were dissecting, quoting, cheering, condemning. The entire internet had turned its collective attention to the train wreck they'd just witnessed live. But more than outrage, there was awe. Something about the moment felt bigger than just gossip. Cher hadn't simply clapped back or lost it. She had dragged the curtain off the entire illusion, exposed the power dynamics, the hypocrisy, the polished cruelty wrapped in daytime smiles. And she had done it with terrifying grace. Producers huddled behind the set, their faces lit up by phones and emergency emails. Networks were calling, advertisers wanted answers. The clip was already being analyzed by media outlets, and every word Cher had said was being quoted like scripture. The irony, they had wanted a viral moment. They had gotten one, just not the kind they could control. Back in the dressing rooms, Cher sat alone. She didn't check her phone. She didn't ask for water. She simply stared into the mirror, not to fix her makeup, which was still flawless, but to center herself. The adrenaline was fading now, but the fire inside hadn't dimmed. If anything, it was clearer than ever. She knew how this worked. By now, the narrative machine would be spinning. They'd call it a meltdown. They'd say she snapped. They'd try to package it, soften it, turn it into an entertainment segment with a catchy jingle and a guest panel. But the audience wasn't stupid. Not anymore. Not after what they'd just seen. A knock at the door broke the quiet. A junior producer peeked in, young and clearly terrified. Cher, there's media outside, reporters, lots of them. Do you want us to escort you out a different way? Cher didn't move at first. Then she stood, slowly and deliberately. "No," she said, "I'll go out the front." The assistant blinked. The front? There's a lot of cameras out there." Cher met his eyes, steady and calm. "Then they can see what resilience looks like." And with that, she stepped out of the dressing room and began walking down the hallway, her heels echoing off the polished floor. As she approached the glass exit doors, she could already see the crowd forming. Reporters, paparazzi, curious onlookers. Flashbulbs flickered in anticipation. She didn't flinch. When she emerged onto the sidewalk, the chaos erupted. Questions were shouted, microphones extended, camera shutters snapped like machine guns. But Cher didn't answer. She didn't need to. She walked slowly, confidently, head high, the living embodiment of defiance wrapped in dignity. And as the swarm of media surged around her, trying to reshape the story, Cher simply kept moving, because the story wasn't theirs anymore. It was hers. If you like this video, then subscribe.